We've heard about government, we've heard about different experiences. Ultimately, there is one thing that we haven't touched on, and that's entrepreneurs, right? Entrepreneurs are necessary in building out these hubs, in creating industry. So I've been asked to cover the topic, and why me? Well, let me tell you a bit about myself. I am what people would refer to as a serial entrepreneur. I've started 5 companies. The last company, not the current one, but the previous company I started was a software company called Jack B, like Jack Be Nimble, Jack Be Quick. And Jack B had the fortune to be the first Mexican software startup to gain venture capital funding from the US. And subsequently, I moved to Washington, D.C. So it was started in Mexico City in an apartment about a mile away from here in La Colonia Condesa. My brother and I were, coding and doing all the stuff. So we started here, got U.S. VC funding, moved to Washington, D.C., where I lived. I've now lived for 10 years. So ran the company for about a dozen years. The market was fortunate to us, so we grew the company up to 170 employees, offices in Hyderabad, in San Francisco, Mexico, DC, the UK, and after 12 years of hard work, the company was acquired by Software AG about 18 months ago. So, it's full circle, and ultimately became the first Mexican startup, or first startup founded in Mexico that went through the entire cycle, right? Series A, B, C, D, and then acquisition from a multinational. So I'm very proud of the fact, and because of that, I've sort of become a poster boy for the Mexican entrepreneur and the art of the possible. So as I told you that beautiful plan, obviously it all sounds perfect, right? You start a company, the company goes viral, you sell a bunch, and then you sell the company. Well, most of you, well, not most of you, all of you, right, know that it's not that easy. So, plans are never linear, right? It never goes the way you expect it. I remember when we started the company, and I was telling my brother, if this thing lasts 3 years, we'll be lucky. And 12 years later, right, it felt like a marathon, well, no, like a triathlon, but again, we were able to sell it. So when I'm talking about entrepreneur, right, I'm referring interchangeably to entrepreneur and intrapreneur. For me, an entrepreneur isn't the lonely guy who starts a company in the basement or in the garage. Sure, that's one exponent of them, but the second exponent is the intrapreneur, and there's a ton of you here as well. So those people who belong into a company and are actually starting a new division, right? So we have Tech Mahindra here. The intrapreneur is the fact that they've come into Mexico and sort of expanded, right? Serious. I mean, all of you who work for a big company can still be intrapreneurs. But the good news is that for us, intrapreneurs or entrepreneurs, change is actually what drives us, right? The ability for markets to change and for us to grab opportunity by the horns, whatever that change was, and then find success within that change and change the environment to mimic our vision is what this is about. This quote from Edison I absolutely love, right? So there's a ton of opportunities, right? But opportunities missed because it is dressed in overalls and looks like work. All right, I mean, you think about this. A lot of people say, so early stage startups, right? I don't want to share my idea because if I share my idea, everyone's going to do it. Well, I got news for you. No one's going to do it because no one's passionate about that idea the way that you're passionate, right? If you're starting a company, if you're bringing a company here, there can already be 3, 4, 5 companies. It doesn't matter. Ultimately, this is about hard work, and because it is about hard work, again, that's the good news. If you're willing and able to put in the work and to do the innovation, then success will ultimately be there. Some of you may know. Thomas Alva Edison actually went through about 10,000 different filament tests before he found the right filament for the light bulb, right? I mean, imagine that. 10,000 times you failed, and you still had the motivation to get up in the morning and do something. So this quote is great because ultimately, right, we focus on the failure, or at least most people focus on the failure. But the good news is when you fail, you sort of crossed out a way that doesn't work anymore. And when we talk about agile development, when we talk about all these things, that's really what this is about, right? This is about finding ways that don't work much quicker. And by sort of throwing those out and correcting, we're able to go in the direction that's needed. So, another piece of great work. The best way that I can describe what an entrepreneur is a guy that's getting his ass kicked by 10 people and still thinks he's going to win the battle. Right? I mean, that's ultimately what it feels like. And you just have to have an undying belief in your idea, in yourself, in your team, right? And just make the jump. In the 12 years that I ran my software company, I can tell you this is absolutely true. Mahatma Gandhi was a genius, right? And this is true for business, right? You come out with an idea, and first they ignore you, right? They sort of poo-poo it. Then they laugh at you because it's never going to work. Then they ultimately fight you or copy you, and then hopefully you win. So the fact that there's competition in the market, it's bad. But the good news is, us entrepreneurs, intrapreneurs, by innovating, by figuring out the way to actually touch the fundamental threads of a market, right? The big companies, the steadfast competitors, they're usually not as nimble and not as quick. And because of that, we're able to compete. So this isn't necessarily about size. This is about attitude. If you persevere, you will find success. That's the good news. The bad news is, just when you think you're successful, it starts all over again because business doesn't stop, right? And there will be competitors that are now after you. So, the Elon Musk quote, you have to constantly be thinking about what you could do better. Because if you rest on your laurels, ultimately someone will come and beat you. So, faith, and the second one, perseverance, right? I love stories about the overnight success. I once heard Harrison Ford, the actor, and after Star Wars, he was called an overnight success, and that's great news. What people don't know is that Harrison Ford moved 14 years prior to starring in Star Wars to Hollywood, and he was a carpenter because he couldn't get any job, a job. So he was a carpenter building Hollywood sets, and then finally, he got a job. And was able to do that. Same could be said of any professional who's been successful in any entrepreneur. The fact that Steve Jobs is saying this, I think is great, right? Perseverance and Steve Jobs go hand in hand. Here's a guy who created a company, overnight success, was fired from his own company, right? Then created another one, was acquired. I mean, just the picture of perseverance. There is one sort of thing that living in the U.S., I've noticed about entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs. And this is a quote from Richard Marcinko. Those of you who don't know who Richard Marcinko is, he is the founder of the SEALs, right? He was the guy who actually created the special force in the U.S. Army, Navy actually, the SEALs, which oddly enough trained in San Diego, right off the coast of San Diego, in Coronado, and in Virginia Beach. But we need to figure out a way to train, right, in order to be successful. This is about muscle memory. This is about having experience. This is about being able to take all those experiences and put them in the market. And what is the best way for us entrepreneurs to train? So it's about surrounding ourselves with other business people, right? Success-minded people, because success does breed success. And if you're able to come together with other people who are being successful, I like a quote, the rising tide lifts all ships, right? So ultimately, by banding together entrepreneur with entrepreneur, even if they are competitors, right? I was having a conversation yesterday where I said, we may be competitors, but this isn't only about you and I. This is about the country. This is about trying to raise all ships by creating a bigger piece of the pie, right? Or a bigger pie, even if it's a smaller piece. So, I think there are in this slide, which I love, there are a few key things about the anatomy, the typical entrepreneur. A lot of people think that the typical entrepreneur looks like a college student, right, who codes in his underwear, eats pizza, and then finds success. And yes, there are those stories, but the reality is that's seldom how entrepreneurs work. Entrepreneurs typically have industry experience. So those of you who are captains of your companies, captains of industry, the good news is if you motivate people, right? If you teach people, if you let them think for themselves and are motivated, they will end up creating new companies. The typical entrepreneur doesn't start one company, right? The typical entrepreneur actually starts 2.3 companies. I don't know how you start 0.3 companies, but that is what this says. So, starting more than one is typically the norm. And then, again, see, most people are married and with at least one, if not two kids. So not the typical college student coding in their underwear. So if this is the anatomy of the entrepreneur, it's about finding a way to bring entrepreneurs together. Right? We've heard from government yesterday and today. It's about making the reforms, but ultimately it's about us, the entrepreneurs, banding together, working together, even if we compete, whatnot. Motivating others to start their own companies, find success, find failure, continue to look at it. And this is done through different hubs. So Guadalajara is now an upcoming hub. Monterrey is another hub. I don't know why Tijuana hasn't turned into one, which sort of depresses me. But I guess that's something we're going to have to do on our own. These are some of the hubs worldwide, and the good news is there's more than one. The bad news is there's more than one. So again, there's competition, right? This isn't Guadalajara. The fact that we call Guadalajara the Silicon Valley, I got news for you. No one else calls it the Silicon Valley of Mexico, right? That's just our moniker in order to feel better about ourselves, right? But the Israelis certainly don't think of Guadalajara that way, and the Russians don't think of Guadalajara that way. So it's up to us to, continue to fulfill that vision. And I remember when I started my company, people would tell me, nothing like this has been done in Mexico, right? Mexicans don't create products. Mexicans provide services. I don't know why they came up with that, but ultimately this is about what we can do. The other countries or the other similar examples that started off as services-based entrepreneurs or industry and then moved towards product. So India, I'll show you some statistics. The Indian startup entrepreneurial activity today is incredible. It is amazing. I was just there 2 weeks ago, and you can feel the buzz of people starting product companies, right? Not only service companies. So it's amazing. Poland is another one. Finland in video gaming or in apps, right, is huge. Sweden, right? In voice over IP, VoIP apps, you have Skype, you have a bunch of stuff. So a lot of these, if the fact that we're starting off in the services industry, A, is great news, and B, doesn't preclude us from actually moving up the value chain. These are the statistics from India. So if you look at prior to 1995, only 78 product companies had been created in the history of India. And as you can see, the more that people got comfortable, right? If we go back to Richard Marchenko and the fact that he said practice, 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 people feel comfortable, they're willing to go out and make that leap of faith. So we started with a historical number of 78 prior to 1995, and now you have upwards, close to 500 companies being created per year in India. For every job that is created in the IT industry, because they're typically well-paying jobs, and those well-paying jobs people go out and spend, there's 4.3 other jobs that are created. So think about this, right? Those of you who are coming into this country in order to create 100, 200, 300 positions, what you're doing is you're actually creating 1,000 jobs. So, Pro Mexico, the fact that they're getting involved in bringing the companies into Mexico, it's about the facts, right? This is the reason why they're doing them. It's about being able to raise the standard of living for everyone here. Whenever my kids tell me, but I tried, right? And if you remember what Yoda said, right? Do or don't. There is no try. There is no try, right? So go out there and do it full-heartedly with the best spirit. Make that leap of faith. Believe in yourself. Recruit the best team that you can and attack the marketplace. Right? Government can make whatever changes in legislation or whatever reforms in the Constitution or whatnot, but that's ultimately not going to create jobs. It's us who are going to create the jobs in order to take advantage of those inflections in the market and actually go out there and innovate. And then lastly, speaking of sort of inflections in the market, I started a new company, right? So I sold Jackby, as I mentioned 18 months ago, and I found myself thinking, so what do I do now? And ultimately, we founded a company called Nearshore Delivery Solutions. And I will read this in order to get it right. I can certainly explain what we do, but what we do is for international IT sourcing firms who find themselves competing with and sometimes losing business to near sourcing competitors on the basis that it is better and more efficient to have a delivery center nearby geographically and in the same time zone. NDS enables international firms to match near sourcing offerings by making it easy and affordable to have their own nearshoring delivery center in Mexico. What does that mean? So a lot of international firms are now actually losing business to Mexican firms because of our prime geographic position. So it's incumbent on them to actually come into Mexico, hire Mexican engineers, and deliver the services, right, from Mexico into the North American market. We create a soft landing for them, whether it's legal, real estate, talent acquisition, constant operations. I say jokingly that we're the back office to all the IT outsourcing firms. So we take care of all the crap that no one wants to take care of, so they can take care of business. That's really what we do. And I'll just end my presentation. Yesterday when I was hearing the panels and, is it near sourcing or near shoring or whatnot, and the benefits that Mexico has as a country, it reminded me of what Harvard Business School once said about, the restaurant business. And, it's all about location, 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 right? And the great news is we find ourselves in a prime location. And now it's about us entrepreneurs being able to go out and take advantage of that location in order to serve the biggest markets in the world. Thank you very much.